Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, August 14th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. Eno fresh off a trip to Chicago, hence the late afternoon Monday record time. You'll be hearing this episode a little bit later than usual. So we'll
fresh
talk about...
is not the word I'd use.
You know what? I was trying to round up and help you. I think our listeners, our loyal listeners especially, know that travel is harsh on you.
Especially with I'm an 8.5 hour night guy, you know, between the beers and the 8 a.m. conference starts. Yeah.
That's just how it goes. So
not the word.
We'll talk about a few takeaways from that conference. We'll talk about some mailbag questions, including a good one about late season starting pitching strategy. We had a question about sweepers, one asking if we're still in the stone age of arm health. So a lot of pitching related things to get to. But the big news shocking the baseball world over the weekend, Wander Franco has now been placed on the restricted list. Major League Baseball is looking into social media posts that surfaced over the weekend. The posts allege that Franco had an inappropriate relationship with a minor. So disgusting allegations at this point, and there's not a ton that we know. The latest that I saw as of Monday afternoon is that he'll be on the restricted list until at least August 22nd. And we know from similar instances, a lot of times the league's investigation takes several weeks to be completed. So there's a lot of uncertainty just in general as far as when we might have more information that comes to light.
Yeah, and it's being a part of the coverage and knowing now, how the Athletic works in times like these, like it's a really difficult process right now. Reporters want to give as much information as possible, but there are legal ramifications for saying the wrong thing. And in the case of a minor, there's even sharing the allegations is problematic. Like those are, pictures of a minor. So right now it's just one of those really weird spots where you just have to kind of respect the process, I think. And I think I understand the need for information and the desire for information, especially when put up against the fact that now he is suspended. It feels like, we should have more information about why he's suspended. But because I think there's a minor involved in this, you kind of have to be respectful and take the steps you're supposed to take. And that includes asking the team for comment, asking them asking his agent for comment, getting the comment from the player. And it's not really, it's not really good journalism to say much before you have those things,
right?
Because you're just salaciously retweeting a picture of a young girl kissing Wander Franco. It's just like, that's not cool either. So I think we've just got to wait, and I hope there's some sort of middle ground of truth that makes some sense, because right now it just seems really sad.
Yeah, right there with you. But we'll share more information once we do have something to pass along on this situation. As far as the trip goes, getting to Chicago, getting to listen to a lot of very bright folks talk about the game from a lot of different angles, it sounded like it was kind of a good late season opportunity for you just to get the brain working in different ways, like thinking about problems in ways maybe you previously hadn't. So I was curious, all the different speakers you had a chance to listen to, folks you got to talk to during the trip, any major takeaways, either things you're thinking about working on or things you heard or learned that you thought were really interesting from that trip?
Yeah, the bulk of it for me was discussions about Stuff Plus, and there were 3 presentations that included Stuff Plus in some way or another, and tried to improve on some aspect of it, or get better results than it. And so I'll get to those in a second. Otherwise, some of the cool presentations, I saw one of them by Dr. Alan Nathan was really interesting. He found that bats with higher frequencies, like that's what I mean, like sound frequencies.
Yeah.
Bats with higher sound frequencies produced higher exit velocities. And
First, even to look at that,
how the bat vibrates. And so he created a really simple test where you hold the bat kind of by its handle, and then you take the ball and you kind of tap it along it until you find the place where it vibrates the least. That's kind of like harmonic center of the bat. And then at that place, you ping it. So it's kind of like on the skinnier side of the barrel. It's not all the way down on the barrel. And you sort of just take the ball and ping it against the baseball bat. And if you have two different wooden baseball bats and you do that, you'll hear two different sounds. And the higher sound is the bat that's going to produce higher exit velocities. So I thought I love how it also comes with like a pretty simple test, that almost anybody can do. And it kind of goes hand in glove with, I swear to God, I've heard players talk about, because I did this piece with Keenan Long at Long Ball Labs, where we talked about this on the pod too, about, how different each bat can be. And I swear when we were talking to players, some of them would talk about like sort of flicking it and listening to it and like and listening, and the joke is like, oh, I hear more hits than this one, but like literally you can.
That is pretty remarkable. So even with that test, it's not there's not some other piece of equipment that goes alongside the bat as you're doing the tap test.
I mean, he did it with more robust equipment where that's capturing the precise MHZ, like the whatever the measure of frequency is,
That's megahertz.
Yeah, so I guess he had something that was like giving precise megahertz precision measurements, and that helped him, of course, plot it all and do good research. But in terms of he ended it with a real subjective thing where he's like, hey, this one was lower and this one sounds higher. You can hear it, and the one that was higher produces better exit velocities. So that one blew my mind. Stuart Wallace did a pretty cool presentation about how neck mobility is an unexplored risk factor for elbow injury. And he was able to show that shoulder strength goes down for some pitchers, depending on how far they can move their neck, like towards their shoulders. So that was an interesting thing, because I think the neck is not really something that people measure force on or think about that often. And so he made a case that there should be more research there. Sean O'Rourke did a cool presentation about whether or not baseball data can be democratic, and it was about sort of the delicate thing when it comes to baseball data of measuring the needs of the many versus the needs of the individual. And that's how he set it all up, was democracy is this sort of interplay between the wanting to do quick action, wanting to do unified action, but also wanting to let people have autonomy and also, have a vote, right? It's not just about voting for stuff. It's that relationship between the many and the few. And so you can think about that in baseball data and be like, yeah, teams and baseball writ large wants to, for example, let's do something that's altruistic. They want to keep their players healthier, right? In order to do this quick unified action, to do this big unified action, which is keep the players healthier, you may want to ask every player for detailed biological, biomechanical measurements of their bodies that go beyond sort of reported data, which is like, he had a double today in the game. Now we're talking about his Vegas, his ability to rotate things, his strength and mobility in different joints. Some of these things may be unchangeable. And therefore, you could be giving the team information about yourself that is health information that could be used against you. he does not have good hip rotation or hip mobility. And we found that guys, neck mobility, I just gave you a piece. What if he finds that neck mobility is a risk factor, and now teams measure everybody's neck mobility in spring, and you give them the opportunity to do that and let them do that, and now they know that your neck isn't mobile and you're going to get hurt, and so you're on the list of pitchers to trade before he gets hurt.
Yeah, they could use it against you there. They could use it against you in an arbitration case in some way. I mean,
what was nice is that Sean pointed out that they're not allowed to use in arbitration because there's a collectively bargained process in arbitration in which the union has power and has said nothing wearable is allowed. Nothing that comes from wearable tech is allowed in arbitration. That's in the CBA. So his solution was, if we do want it to be democratic, then we have to basically organize and have to have a minor league union and have to have maybe even a college player union because these college players are being measured in the same way. And that allows you some control over the data, and you get to, maybe get a quid pro quo, get something back for giving them access to that, something that, better pensions so that the people who are hurt, better medical, maybe something like that. But you, if you organize, you have some power over it, and you can maybe have a democratic process around data. Because without that power, you're just taking the data, taking the data from the individual.
Well, good on the Players Association for being ahead of the curve on that.
That's good for them to think about that issue. And it's definitely something that I talk to with players all the time. Trevor May, for example, is recording every little bit about his life in terms of, resting heart rate in the morning, sleep that he had, how much hydration, every little bit. He's recording that. And I asked him if he would give the team access to that. And he said, sure, because I want to know it. I want to know as much as I can from it. I want to, learn from it. And I also just don't think, as an older reliever, that, there's anything in here that that'll get me in trouble. Basically, he's like, they're measuring me based on Stuff Plus and fastball velo. Like they don't care about how much I sleep at night. It might just help me figure things out. So there was those were some of the particular ones I liked. Oh, Sarah Thompson from Sports Info Solutions had an interesting piece that has no fantasy value really, but it was talking about how what's the impact of directional momentum on an infield play. So if you've got a guy who's going towards second base to get a ball and he needs to throw it to first, versus a guy who's gathering the ball on the way to first. And she went, and I think they revised some of the stuff in defensive run saves to account for this, because plays, I think she had some play by Mookie Betts where she was like, on plays going away from first base of a certain type, like of medium difficulty otherwise, he could be 90% if he's going towards first base to get the play, and more like 65% when he's going towards second base to make the play. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. But so the last part was a lot of talking about Stuff Plus. We had a presentation from Scott Powers, who used to run the Braves, used to be in the Dodgers R&D department, and now is a professor of sports analytics and at Rice University. And so Scott Powers and Vicente Iglesias worked together to do something that was very similar to Stuff Plus in output, but in terms of how they modeled it within, it was different. And one of the things that they considered in their model that I did not really consider much in ours was the amount of noise that can be had around a pitch trajectory. So, for example, a pitcher throws an 88 mile an hour slider with, two vertical or whatever, right? And what we found was, if he throws that 5 times, then you can say pretty well that that's what his slider looks like. There's not actually that much noise around it. But what they did was, there is some noise, and sometimes it's 86. with 4 vertical, or you know what I mean? Like there is some like difference from pitch to pitch. And so they threw that uncertainty into their model. But they weren't able to beat a regress Stuff Plus. So, I thought it was an interesting idea from the standpoint of that. There was another Stuff Plus model done by Cal Aldred, who used to be in the analytics department for the Blue Jays. His was pretty close to the actual Stuff Plus, but he did some stuff where he kind of did some of his own pitch classifications. So he kind of did some clustering analysis to just be like, these, I'm going to do my own pitch classifications instead of taking from anywhere. Because there is some, we've talked about this on the show, there are some pitfalls that can happen in Stuff Plus due to pitch classification. And then privately, I was talking with a lot of different people about Stuff Plus, and one of the things that I kept talking about was that we base the pitches stuff, the secondary pitches Stuff Plus off the fastball. Then people have 2 fastballs. What do you do in that situation? And what we just do is we base it right now off the number 1 hard pitch thrown in a game. So it's almost defined by game, and you're just like, well, he threw the 4-seam the most. That's his primary fastball. We're going to define everything off the 4-seam, right? The problem with that is that maybe against lefties, they never throw the sinker, and they're 4-seam against lefties. But then maybe against righties, they throw a lot of sinkers. And so, one thing you could do is split every pitcher in 2. And just be like, this is Andrew Haney against lefties, and this is Andrew Haney against righties. And I'm going to define all the Stuff Plus based on the primary fastball in those situations, and then I'm just going to slam it back together again. It could work. We'll look at it for sure. It's something to think about. Another thing to think about would be, and this I think is better for player development than it is for evaluation or fantasy, which is you could create a Stuff Plus, say, call it Stuff 4 or Stuff 2, and basically have a whole set of stuff numbers based around their 4-seam, and then a whole set of stuff numbers based on their 2-seam. Now, why I think this would be cool in player development is if you're a pitching coach, you can be like, whoa, okay, all right, I see some pitch pairings here that we need to do. And like, oh, this pitch is way better if he pairs it basically with the 2-seam than the 4-seam. And then maybe even you could come up with stuff with like, man, all his numbers are better Stuff 2S. We should just be spending more time improving his sinker, his 2-seamer, just because it seems like all his stuff is better on that side. That's the direction we should go. And it might even give you hints as to, oh man, these pitches are better off of a 2-plane pitch than off of a 1-plane pitch. If that's another thing you could sort of think if you saw a bunch of Stuff 2 that was better. Anyway, that would be hard then to sort of remash together to get a 1 number. And for evaluation purposes, it seems like that's a player development answer. But it does make you think about applications for Stuff Plus and how it's used and how it's best used. And that was a primary mode of conversation for me over the weekend.
So we had a couple of related questions, even though I don't think the listeners who sent these questions were at the conference, but they're very much on topic with some of these concepts that you're bringing to the table. One of those is a question from Brian, and it's a Stuff Plus training data question. Hearing Eno talk about the league's hitters adapting to sliders and how sinkers seem to be more effective this year got me thinking about how Stuff Plus changes over time. Have you looked into how much training data is optimal when fitting the Stuff Plus model? As an example, are sweeper slider stuff numbers inflated for 2023 because they used 2021 data for model training and hitters hadn't seen as many sweepers at that point and hadn't had time to adjust their approaches? If so, are there any trends that would lead to a load 'em approach that goes against particular stuff numbers and bets on other profiles? It leads to a philosophical rabbit hole, since it would imply pitcher throwing the exact same number of pitches in 2 different years might have different stuff numbers, but maybe that makes sense because a pitch's quality is dependent on the hitter they're facing's ability to hit it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things in here, which is that like this year, sinkers are performing better relative to other pitches than they have in the pitch tracking era, and this year sliders are performing worse relative to the other pitches than they have in the pitch tracking era. And so, you could come away with a few conclusions. That one is that maybe we're approaching too many sliders. Maybe this is. Now we're throwing, or maybe the hitters are being trained to hit sliders because they're seeing so many sliders from pitchers. So they're basically, the game is training them to be better against sliders. And then the opposite would be true for sinkers, is they just don't see good sinkers anymore, but also they don't see bad sinkers anymore. The number of sinkers thrown goes down, down, down. Who's left throwing sinkers? People who have good sinkers. So that's one thing, is to think maybe, okay, all right, maybe like a slider heavy guy is not going to be as good this year, and maybe there's definitely some examples out there of guys with sinkers that seem to be outperforming some of their projections and some of their modeling. So that's a simple kind of answer there, but there's a deeper, more philosophical question where I saw criticism of Stuff Plus is saying, of course it's going to beat FIP or Sierra or all these other things because, it's born yesterday, basically. Like it's the newest. It was trained on 21 and 2021 and 22 data. So it knows what the run environment is. It knows what the ball is. It knows things about how the game is played right now. And so it's only going to get worse as we train it less going forward. And I totally get that criticism. It is definitely trained on more data. Like I know, for example, there's another Stuff Plus out there where that person has trained it against 2023 data and is getting some better numbers than my Stuff Plus. But it's like, so I've been on the other side of that, I've been like, well, you just trained it on 2023 data. Of course yours is better. We have made the choice to not update Stuff Plus during this season because it's the first season it's on Fangraphs. We just want to, have it be the same all year, not do anything under the hood, gather some different things we want to do, and then maybe do it in the off season. So that's our plan. But I want to push back a little bit on the idea that because it was trained on recent data, it's lesser. And in fact, wonder if that makes it is that a feature maybe and not a bug? And my understanding is this: do you think you'd be more likely to know something about baseball the way it's been played the last 3 years? With the ball that's being played and how it is and how strategy is right now, or to know something about baseball that's been true for 130 years.
Yeah, generally, I think you want the more recent snapshot because the game changes and changes and then changes some more, and you'd have so much noisy information that would be, I think, worthless based on how it's played currently.
Yeah, we would have no... I like if we were running Stuff Plus and it was still the Stuff Plus that was trained it was trained in 1986 and was born in 86 and through 84 through 86 was the birth of Stuff Plus, then I think it would love the heck out of sinkers because people used to throw sinkers and hitters weren't necessarily grooving their bat path to like destroy sinkers. But then in the late 80s, early 90s, the ball started flying further. 87 is one of the first big ball flight years where the ball just changed all of a sudden in 1 year. And so you start getting this better ball flight. And if you have better ball flight, then what are you going to do? You're going to build a swing that can take that low sinker and put it in the seats, and so you had this massive change in how hitters approach things. And now... no matter what kind of model you're looking at, it'll tell you cannot throw a sinker righty on lefty. Do not do that. So, the game changes. And so I don't know. That's something to think about long term. And then there was one last thing that came up that might be relevant. I have to think about it. Sorry, I just had it and then I lost it again.
It's okay. I'll have more for the Lodem angle of that question down the road, because I have to think about what exactly, like what holes I want to poke in everything before. There needs to be some reasoning behind Lodem before I like try to scale that concept out to something I would actually trust for team building purposes.
Well, let me give you some food for thought, maybe, because there was an attendee that came up to me, Sam Walsh, and his Twitter handle is Samuel J. Walsh. Young student, just graduated, looking for a job in baseball, and he had a very interesting critique of not only Stuff Plus, but xERA, xWOBA, some of the expected stats. And it goes like this. So if you're doing this work where you have you're trying to create an expected metric, most of the time, the first thing you do is try to remove context. And you're trying to just look at the probability of hitting a single or hitting a double. You're not trying to predict something like RBI, in this, because what you're trying to do is predict just the likelihood of these different events. And you want the cleanest events. So it's first, second, double, single, triple, maybe ground ball, fly ball, maybe predicting launch angles and exit velocities. Like we are some of that and Stuff Plus. So, but you want it to be devoid of context, because you just want to be trying to create these context lists, because context is where team stuff comes in, and context is where that's the noise of the everyday game is context. Was there a guy on first and second when you hit your homer, right? Matters. Or was there nobody on base when you hit your homer? I mean, that could be the difference in a game. But is there any reasoning? Was he more likely to hit the homer when there was first and second, or no? Or was he more likely to hit the homer when there's nobody on first and second? So it's like you would try to take that context out and be like, I just want to know the likelihood he's going to hit a homer. You know what I mean? So that's sort of the underlying thing. But here's an interesting thing that happens. If you do that, you don't maybe, and this is Sam Walsh's point, you don't maybe value double plays enough. Right? Because you're just like, what's the value of a ground ball in all situations? And so, you're trying to take context out by just saying, what's the value of a ground ball? What is the intrinsic value of a ground ball? And you don't necessarily, you start talking about what's the likelihood of a single. And you don't talk about what's the likelihood of a double play in the current structures of xERA, xWOBA, and stuff. Now, here's a problem with that. If you start putting your finger in the model, right, and you're going to say, hey, I don't think we value ground balls enough. I'm just going to take my finger in here and be like, more value on ground balls because of double plays, right? Well, somebody pointed out, well, what's going to happen is that your value for sliders and four seams is going to go down. You know why? Because you use four seamers and sliders for whiffs. And if you're pushing the value around and saying, no, I need more double plays, then the contextual stuff for four seamers and sliders starts to come in and be like, well, maybe I should put my finger over here and put some more value on four seams and sliders, because they get you whiffs if the bases are loaded and it's 3-2 count. They're not going to throw a sinker. You know what I mean? So then you become this person who's like putting a bunch of fingers everywhere, just trying to be like trying to move things around. So I'm done to talk to Sam some more, and there may be something that we can do about it. And he thinks that would greatly improve the model on changeups and sinkers, which is still one of the weaknesses of the model. So, and I also wrote on Friday about, where there's some starting pitcher groups that seem to do better than Stuff Plus and Pitching Plus. And what I found was that you're slightly more likely to be better if you have more pitches. It's the stuff we've talked about here. More pitches, and a changeup. So if you're looking for pitchers, I like Emerson Hancock, I think is really interesting in this analysis. Plus changeup that Stuff Plus doesn't love yet. It's in a small sample, so you don't know. However, the changeup's also not getting whiffs in the game. But could it be a great double play ground ball machine, type of pitch, but he also doesn't throw like 5 pitches. He throws 3 pitches. But you're talking about a guy who throws 3 pitches, has command, has a good changeup. He may be a guy that you don't sort of hew only to stuff plus on.
There's so much context that I think is valuable, but how pitches interact with each other, right? You have multiple pitches, but are they the right pitches? Like, do they all sync up in a way where you get that ideal banana peel effect, as we've talked about in the past, where you get your 4-seamer with ride, you get your cutter, you got something that cuts into a right-handed, you get like all the different possible movement profiles. You got something with some drop. That's sort of the ideal. But you could just have a lot of pitches and they don't work well together because
Bryce Miller.
You didn't build an arsenal that makes sense. You threw stuff that was comfortable.
Bryce Miller, maybe you can see that each of those pitches coming out of the hand, or maybe they don't look like each other,
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's important to keep in mind too, because if you just say, I'm just targeting anyone who has 5 or more pitches, that's my strategy. It's like, okay, it's a strategy. I don't know if it's going to lead you to constant success. And the other question we got that's sort of related to this, I'll fold this in now too, is from our loyal listener, OJ. OJ writes, I find this sweeper craze confusing. Let me back up. OJ's first line was, hope you guys are dealing well with your separation, which we're just, we didn't see each other as much as you'd think for as close as we lived together because we're just busy, all that stuff. Yeah. So I find the sweeper craze confusing. Tim McCarver and Ralph Kiner always used to say the worst pitch in baseball is the hanging slider. As they explained, the hanging aspect was a function of getting too far under the ball, so you're almost throwing it like an underhanded frisbee toss. The ball then breaks horizontally instead of vertically. As long as the batter's on the right swing path, the ball will be there. The sweeper seems almost like an intentional hanging slider. Is there some amount of break it has to have before it becomes effective? Can you ever throw it to an opposite side batter? It seems like a lefty hitter would just see it forever coming from a righty. And most of all, is it working? Are the guys who are throwing it succeeding with it? So a lot to get to here. I think, are we comfortable saying, if you hang any breaking ball, it's not great. The poorly located breaking balls are going to get hit.
But it is harder to spot a hanging sweeper because they are thrown high in the zone more and they don't have as much drop as other breaking balls.
Right. And I think you had that piece way back in April, and you had one of the examples, I want to say it was the Pablo Lopez gif in that example, where hitters swing under them. They can swing and miss right underneath the sweeper because it doesn't drop the way they expect it to. And that's sort of unique. But as far as the usage of the sweeper, this sort of connects with the idea of, well, what else do you throw? Does this fit the other pitches that you throw? I mean, Shohei Ohtani throws a sweeper, I think, more than anything this season, at least by the Savant classifications. And he throws it to lefties and righties. So it's not just a pitch that he uses only against righties. And by all accounts, it works really well, in part because he's also got a 4-seamer and a cutter. Those are his 3 most used pitches: sweeper, 4-seamer, cutter. So how much of this is just having the right complementary pitch or two to make the sweeper as effective as it can possibly be?
Yeah. So people are having more success against the sweeper than they ever had. And I had the piece of the people having more success against the slider than they ever had. This is the improvement. So last year there were 21,000 sweepers thrown. This year they've already been 22,000 sweepers thrown. So we're gonna go up by at least 50% more sweepers thrown this year. Last year, batters hit 194, 247, 330 against the sweeper. That's why everyone started throwing sweeper. This year, there's been a massive improvement. This is the best anyone's ever done against sweeper in this database as a league. It's 203, 256, 354. That's a pretty big improvement. That's 24 points of slugging in 1 year on the pitch. So what you have is, this is such a big craze that I think more people are throwing it to lefties. More people are throwing them in hitters counts. More people are throwing sweepers. The hitters are starting to see it and train against it. And that means more bad sweepers. So some people are throwing sweepers that shouldn't be. Maybe Bryce Miller. And then you have the slider. Well, the slider is being hit better than ever by itself. So even if you take the sweeper out, this year it's being hit 224, 279, 384. So despite there being this big jump up on how hitters are hitting the sweeper, that 354 slugging for the sweeper is still lower than the 384 slugging for the slider. So the sweeper is still a very powerful pitch. I expect there to be more and more of it, because even with this regression, you've found that that hitters have not learned it completely, and they're not even hitting it as hard as regular sliders. And that 354 slugging, I would probably venture is the best of any pitch type. But I'll check changeups real quick, because they do kind of reduce slugging. But so it's sweeper's still a good pitch. It's not as good as it was before. It's way more popular. Changeups this year have a 381 slugging. So the sweeper is still the best pitch in baseball, even though it's worse than it was before.
Yeah, the reasoning on that all makes sense. Like the dilution, especially. Yeah, more people are throwing it. More people are throwing it doesn't mean they're all good. Like that's just a thing. It depends why you're throwing it. It might be the desperation adjustment for some guys that are on the bottom of the roster, just trying to find something that keeps them in the league. And maybe it works, and maybe it's just as bad as the other pitches that were kind of steering them out of the league in the first place, right?
Maybe they're just a bad pitcher.
Right. It's harsh, but unfortunately, probably very true.
One last bit, though. He was talking about the hanging aspect.
Yeah.
I think this is why some people will say, well, the sweeper's been around forever. It's a slurve. And that's exactly what the sweeper is not. Like a good sweeper, and this is also probably why there's some good sweepers and some bad sweepers. A good sweeper uses seam-shifted wake to drop less than you'd expect. And what's happening is the seams are gathering at the top, so you get a little bit of a spinning slider dot at the top where the seams gather there. They create a wake, and that keeps the ball from dropping. It sort of pulls the ball up. And so, that's what you were alluding to with the Pablo Lopez thing. They swing under it, it stays up and swings under it. So it's in fact less of a two-plane pitch and more of a one-plane pitch that looks like a two-plane pitch. So that's why we've come up with the sweeper designation, because I think to the batter it looks like a slurve, and then it doesn't drop as much as they expect. And that's a sweeper. And that's kind of difficult if you kind of expect a ball to have, when you see a ball have that much horizontal movement, I think your brain thinks this is a two-plane thing. This is a curveball, and it's basically like a curveball without any of the curveball drop. It's just like, if you want to call it a frisbee, now I can get on board. It's a frisbee, but it's not, I don't think, a slurve. Anyway.
I was just about to add the screenshot I was looking at of Ohtani's pitch locations. I always find these to be pretty fascinating. And again, these are the three pitches he throws the most: the sweeper, the four-seamer, and the cutter. I'm sorry, we're describing something on the screen. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, this makes sense, but we'll try to make it make sense if you're listening to the podcast version. Part of the reason I think this is working so well for Ohtani is that he has a pretty consistent location strategy. So if those pitches all look reasonably similar coming out of his hand, they're going to cause some problems. Just looking at where he goes, it's kind of low, middle, in on the zone. Like not middle in, but low, like middle third part of the strike zone for all those pitches.
Yeah, for each of these pitches, the sweeper is going to take off towards the lefty batter box in terms of movement. The four seam is going to jump more and stay true, and the cutter is going to be somewhere in between them in terms of movement. So yeah, you're right. That's three pitches coming from the same trajectory that are going to do very different things, at least horizontally and also kind of vertically. So, maybe there's some sort of, quote unquote tunneling happening here. And you can also tell from this heat map that Ohtani's trying to sneak his sweeper in back door against lefties. And I think that is probably the best way to do it, because what happens with the sweeper is it's so horizontal that the lefty sees it forever and knows what pitch it is, and I think usually takes. So the only way you can kind of sneak a sweeper by a lefty, I think, is try to pepper the outside part of the plate and don't miss middle.
But that's true of just about every pitch, right? You can't miss middle with most things. It's going to get hit. So anyway, good question, OJ. Thanks for sending that in. Some other questions that came in for today's episode. Alan was curious about late season starting pitching strategy. In this particular instance, Alan's situation is a 16-team head-to-head categories league with quality starts instead of wins, currently in first place in his division and overall. So it's playoff time for Alan. It's going to be a few weeks away. Here's the problem. John Gray, Nathan Eovaldi, Freddie Peralta, Tanner Bybee, Gavin Williams, Bryce Miller, and Bobby Miller. Those last four especially coming up on innings caps. So Alan's worried he'll be left with the old guys and then having to troll the waiver wire just as the playoffs begin. So especially in deeper leagues with not much pitching out there. And I just saw some breaking news from our friend Katie Wu at The Athletic that Steven Matz's season might be over with a lat strain. So there's one more pitcher who was pitching well who might be on the shelf for the rest of the season.
He cannot stay healthy, dude.
He just can't. It's brutal. What is the adjustment here? How much should you worry if you're relying on some combination of those young starters or others that we've talked about throughout this season? Like, how do you get from here to there, especially in head-to-head leagues where your most important weeks of the season might be the last 2 weeks of the season?
I think he's right to do what he's doing. I think you give up a little bit of future value if it's keeper H2H, right?
I think this is. It doesn't say it's a keeper league, but plenty of people are in that spot.
Well, even if it's not keeper, what you can do is give up a little bit of risk for you can trade some upside for surety. You know what I mean? Like you could trade Bryce Miller and Tanner Bybee to somebody for what's a like a Zach Gallen, right? Would that be impossible? Is that crazy?
You could try that. I mean,
what's a little bit lower than Zach Gallen, but somebody like him.
Is Sonny Gray too far lower?
Yeah, okay.
Or maybe you take one of those guys and trade him for Sonny Gray.
Yeah, but I'm saying, sort of package the risk to get up higher. But maybe buy low on Sandy. I mean, there's a guy who gives you innings, right?
Yeah, try to do 2 for 1 on Sandy.
And who's somebody else I believe in their innings up there? Maybe Eflin.
What about Yusei Kikuchi? He's pitching really well. Has the walk rate down to that career best mark so far. Still missing a good number of bats.
I think he's more of I would use one of those guys, but
yeah.
But yeah, that's not bad. So you trade in some risk for a veteran that doesn't have the same upside as, what maybe a Bryce or Bobby can do the rest of the way. Let me see if I can come up with numbers for you here. I'm going to put the over-under on innings for Bryce Miller at 150. And he's at 110.
You could maybe you can go a little more than that. He went to 132 last year, 133. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So 155. Let's put the over under on 155. The Mariners are probably a little bit more. Let's get to the postseason and then worry about our postseason rotation when we get there more than, let's shut somebody down. That's how I feel. They're kind of got back into the race a little bit. There's some pressure on them to do something. So I would say they're going to use up all of his innings in the regular season. And that means that if he's got another 50 pitches, innings in him, I think he can make it to the end of the season.
Do you think Bobby Miller's projected total is a lot less than Bryce Miller's?
All right. So let's go to Bobby Miller. We've got a total for 2022 at 111. But he's also pitched fewer innings so far. So even if we give him 130, 135 as the over under, he's only at 83. Yeah. So he has a similar amount of innings left. But his team may screw around with his innings to keep him in the postseason rotation. On the 3-0 show, I believe, we put Bobby Miller in as their number 3 in the postseason.
I still think that makes a lot of sense because I think there's a very good chance that he is their third best starter when they've got everybody healthy. We talked about the Lance Lynn schedule. That's happening right now. He's dominating against that weak part of the schedule. So I want to see what happens when Lynn faces some better lineups in the next few weeks. But I think Bobby Miller being handled a little differently. We've seen the Dodgers do it with young pitchers before too, where they pull back a little bit in September and they push them more aggressively in October. But generally, there is enough room here. We don't have to panic about Bobby Miller or Bryce Miller at this point.
Here's the guy to panic about.
Yeah, who's your guy that you're worried about?
I think it might be Tanner Bybee, and it's a little bit less about the innings because he has a fairly robust number of innings. Last year, he put together 133 innings, right? That's pretty good. You want to put the over-under at 155, 160, I wouldn't argue with you. However, he's already at 123. So despite having a higher possible innings cap, Tanner Bybee is closer to it than the other guys. And my last piece of reasoning is the team context situation. I feel like if the Guardians fall out of the race, they don't pitch him. And this isn't something that I think will happen September 1st. But when is your head-to-head competition? When is your head-to-head finals? Because if your head-to-head finals is the last week of the season, I would be like, if they're 6 games out and there's a week to go in the season, Tanner Bybee's not pitching again.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think for Williams, looking at the same rotation, I think he has matched last season's total. If I'm doing the back of the napkin math correctly, 115 last season, 115 right now. It gives them 40 more before they start thinking about a shutdown.
What Williams are we talking about here?
Gavin Williams.
Oh, yeah, Gavin.
Same kind of problem.
Oh, I love him, though. I love his fastball. Yeah. Again, a nice innings total, but same team context, and he's already at it. So what would you give him as another, 25, 30 innings? So they have a couple of pitchers that are going to run up against their innings totals. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. And then there's also the risk that because they have a couple of guys that are coming up on these numbers, that they do something like a 6-man, just to do that. And that's not obviously as bad, but it does mean that you're going to get fewer starts from Gavin Williams, So I think the number of starts for Gavin Williams might be 5 or 6.
What do you think the best tactic is for acquiring the innings you need? A 16-team league, the waiver wire is pretty thin. I mean, if you have to churn a lot and the rules are first come, first serve, decent pitchers will come up. Is it going after players that maybe have shown us signs of turning around a disappointing season, like where the surface numbers are still bad, but the more recent numbers are good? Thinking about Jamison Taillon in particular, where it really seems like he has settled into being, over his last 7 or 8 starts, the pitcher many of us thought he'd be going into the season. I liked him as a mid-rotation filler around pick 200. I thought with the pitch mix, I thought with the ballpark, he was really safe. Leaving Yankee Stadium, some of the problems Taillon's had against lefties, those would be less of a concern because he wouldn't get punished quite as much as he did when he was at Yankee Stadium. And that didn't look true for April and May, but from about June on, he's actually started to look like that guy. Are those the types of guys you're looking for who also don't have any real young pitcher innings risk attached to them either?
Maybe, because I mean, if you want to trade, your young, hot starting pitchers that may have innings risk on them for a pitcher who's established and has been good all year, well, good luck.
You're probably not going to find a lot of willing buyers in that case, or you're going to have to pair them, as you mentioned before, but give 2 and get 1, and even then, that could be tough. Then,
I tend to gravitate towards veterans with established track records that maybe aren't pitching quite up to their numbers, because you just feel like even a non-competitive team may just decide to continue pitching them so that they get right. You know what I mean? So I kind of think of Aaron Nola a little bit as like, man, maybe you could sneak that cheese past the rat. Like maybe you could get a prime guy that people thought was a top 12 pitcher that just hasn't really pitched up to his numbers. And get somebody like that. Because I'm just worried that, like, let's say you take somebody who feel like he has more innings, like Hunter Brown, or somebody who hasn't used their innings up, Hunter Green. He's coming back. I don't know. I feel like you run into just as much as those guys, where maybe the Astros, start coasting at some point, or they go to 6-man because they've got a bunch of guys or whatever. Take Dylan Cease, because he's more the veteran that has innings left. But maybe he's just I saw some analysis that he changed his release point and his extension in order to improve his changeup, and that has messed up his slider and curveball have morphed together. So he's kind of a 2-pitch guy now. It's not a guarantee that Dylan Cease turns it around, but yeah, like Cease and Nola, I would feel amazing by. That's sort of where I would look for something like that.
I think Tarek Skubal would also be on my target list. I mean, because of the time he missed, no real concerns about him getting shut down. Everything looks really good in that arsenal, good swing and miss stuff.
Because he had so few innings, they just want him to build up innings, even on a bad team.
Yeah, I think those are all viable paths, and it's a common problem. You play in a head-to-head league, you play in a roto league too. You're just worried about guys getting shut down and not having enough innings and keeping those counting stats rolling in during those final weeks of the season.
But I think also just think of the psychology of the offer. So the psychology of the offer is you're offering 2 hot young things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it doesn't make as much sense to then try to get a hot young thing back. I think you want to get a boring old thing back.
Yeah.
So think about that, the psychology where you're like, oh, hey, take these hot, awesome hurlers throwing 98 and give me your decrepit 92, give me your Joe Musgrove. He's super boring. Don't worry. I don't know if you can pull that one particular, but that's the sort of thing I'd be looking at. It's like you get something boring back.
Well, thanks a lot for that question, Alan. We've got another question that is connected to the others. I love when things all connect together. Sometimes it's because, we purposely cherry pick questions that work together, but when the mailbag is full of things that are related, it makes our job a lot easier. This question is about how we measure workloads. The Mason Miller segment of your most recent episode led to confusion on why we use innings instead of pitches thrown. We're talking about how long it might take the A's to build Mason Miller up to a full starter's workload, probably a week or so ago. Not all innings are created equal. A 30-pitch inning where a pitcher gets roughed up isn't the same as a 3-pitch inning. If you wanted to go deeper into the weeds, you can tally your pitches thrown in off-day bullpens and warm-up throws. More into innings, DVR and Eno made it seem like it's a race against time to get Miller to as high a number to create a solid benchmark for the following season. Why not use AFL to increase innings or have him throw in-house simulated games? See, the thing about this is, and this was something I thought about with Forrest Whitley several years ago. We were trying to figure out Forrest Whitley's workloads when he was coming off all the injuries. We don't know about all of the side sessions. We don't really understand or have a way of tracking those innings, those pitches, that workload as part of the season workload. So I do think there's a lot here to dig into. But generally, I mean, what do you think? Are we doing this collectively, not just you and I? Are we doing this wrong, measuring innings instead of pitches and looking at pitcher workloads the way that we do?
Well, I mean, there's us on the outside trying to approximate the work that they're doing inside without any of their information. And so that's why we look at past innings totals. And, I also think about how hard they throw their breaking ball. And so, it's sort of generally trying to assess injury risk from the outside without any of the information they have. Then you have your kind of your organizations that are behind that are doing something very similar to what we're doing and just sort of like guesstimating based on innings. Then I think you have your more middle class player development systems, pitching health systems that they wear sleeves sometimes and directly measure stress on the elbow in throwing sessions. I would say that almost every team is tracking pitches thrown when getting warm, getting hot, bullpen sessions. So I think the large meat of baseball is tracking a lot of what our question answer wants them to. Is tracking it more on a minute pitches based level. Now the very best teams have such a robust collection of data that they can marry direct stress on the elbow gotten from arm sleeves to maybe modeled stress on the elbow based on what they found with direct stress and fatigue, and they have a fatigue model. And like the Cubs just signed Mike Son, who had fatigue units, and fatigue units is how long you take between pitches, how hard you throw, how many pitches you threw, how much rest you got. And now that he works for a team, he gets to put 5, 6, 7, 8 more features into his model to model fatigue better. So the Cubs at some point are going to be out in the forefront of exactly what we're talking about here, because they've got one of the guys who is doing it in the public space. I know Casey Mulholland at Connect Pro has the sleeves. He has his own kind of sleeve where he's doing direct measurements. He has his own sort of fatigue modeling. He was close with Mike Son and believed a lot of things he believed. He told me, for example, in my running, that when I do a peak run, it's 72 hours recovery. And so, I've been thinking about, I do my peak runs on Wednesday. That means I'm running again on Friday, and I'm always fatigued and I can feel it. And so I'm not sure I can make my schedule work the way that, Casey Mulholland wants my schedule to work, because I have kids and work responsibilities and stuff. But that's something that pitchers will think about. Like, maybe if I throw 100 innings, I should not do anything for the next 3 days, because I have the 72-hour cycle. Maybe you'll see teams when they push their relievers pretty hard. If it gets past a certain number of pitches, 25, 30, 35 pitches, they will get 2 straight days off. And so I think the better teams are doing most of what he's talking about, but it is hard for us on the outside to approximate all that without the same information.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's well stated. And I think it's still... Is it fair to say that the wearable tech, like the sleeves, it's still too early to know like how much of an impact that might be having in injury prevention? Like it's still, it seems to me like it's still in the, let's just gather a lot of information and see what we can figure out. Are we further than that, or is that where we're really at?
I mean, I think we're in a phase right now of figuring out some stuff about injury, because Jimmy Buffett gave not Buffett. Jimmy Buffett gave a presentation at the conference, and he works at Reboot Motion. And what he does is he can give you biomechanical advice, consultation, if you just upload video into his thing, and he kind of runs it through his system, gets certain angles. He has a model that's like modeled all of these things and related them to stress on the elbow and velocity and stuff like that. So he can tell you, oh, your lead leg flexion is not where other people's are that throw harder, like you're this or that, or, what you do here with your body. So that kind of analysis, the fact that he's presenting at Saberconference means 2 things. It means that some teams are doing more than that already, enough that this guy is presenting, what I mean? And he's comfortable presenting it. Like he's comfortable presenting it because it's not something that nobody knows. And he wants people to know that he knows it. That also means it's not something that everybody knows, because he's at the conference trying to tell teams, hey, you can just send all your video to me and I'll do your biomechanical work for you. That's why, that's how conferences work. You kind of present, you show a little bit of leg, and then the teams are, oh, that's interesting. And then you show them a little more leg, and then you tell them you'll do all their videos. So, we're in a spot right now, I think, where there is separation between teams but all the teams are interested in the space and are all trying to get better at fatigue modeling and biomechanical modeling, so that they can both, it's always 2 things: keep their players healthy and have them throw harder,
right?
Which are diametrically opposed.
That's tug of war right there, just pulling opposite directions. And like, you want both of those things, but you may only be able to have one.
And which one do you think a team will target if they have a choice?
I gotta guess that throwing harder is probably gonna win.
It's probably the throwing harder.
Yeah, staying healthy is gonna get thrown in the mud in that game of tug of war,
especially if you're in Tampa.
Thanks a lot for that question, Joseph. I got a question here from Ted about using defense in fantasy. Why do so few fantasy baseball leagues factor in fielding? Is it because scoring around the league is so inconsistent? Would it make a difference? If we had to drop a stat to factor it in, which stat would you recommend? Runs, RBIs, basically out of the typical roto stats. What would you throw out if you were going to add defense? I think the reason people don't do it is because for a long time, at least back when fantasy baseball started, there were very few useful ways to measure defensive value. I think we've, in the last 10 years, seen a lot kind of come to light that actually helps in that regard. And we've got more public-facing things now, too. So if you wanted to use defensive runs saved or outs above average, you could do that. You could reasonably make that a category. Whether or not you should, I'm more on the no. I don't really want defense to be part of fantasy because I think it's already built in as far as playing time goes. I think understanding a player's defensive limitations or actual skills, that actually gives you a better sense for projecting playing time, and
it's still in fantasy because it's still important for us to know because of playing time for sure.
Yeah. I think it's present enough. I know it's a bigger part of games like Score Sheet, some of the sims out there, but as far as like your roto leagues go, I think we're better off not having it than having it. If I was going to cut one of the roto hitting stats to add a defensive stat, geez, which stat would I get rid of first? Runs? I guess I'd get rid of, I don't know.
It'd be interesting because you would actually probably, there'd be similar players that you would hurt and help in that situation. There's a lot of more top of the order guys that are playing in the most, prestigious defensive positions.
Yeah.
So if you kind of switch it over to defense, you get a lot of top of the order guys still who'll be losing some value on runs. Another thing I think is just one thing that's impractical about it is just the nature of defensive statistics. So most of our stats that we use are counting stats, and even though it says defensive runs saves, it's not really a counting stat in that way. You can have minuses, you can lose it, so and also if you did defensive run saved, it'd be really weird because you'd play a whole year and you'd get a 5 would be an okay number. So right. What would the spread be there? You have to think about the spread. So then if you start doing something that is a counting stat, and I have seen stuff like outs made defensively. The weirdest stuff happens. You need to look at who leads the league in outs. It's like a lot of times it's first baseman.
Right. Yeah. That's
like there isn't really a great defensive counting stat, I would say.
Is it worth trying to make one?
No.
No.
I don't think it really works that way, man. I think you can hurt your team on defense and you can help your team on defense. It doesn't just add up.
Let's see. Outs. I was just going to see if I could pull it up on Baseball Reference while we're talking here. Outs made. No, that's not what I want. I want the defensive outs made, pitching leaderboard, fielding leaderboards, putouts, single season.
Yeah. So I have putouts, and it's JT Realmuto, Nate Lowe, Matt Olson, Spencer Torkelson, Freddie Freeman, Jose Abreu, Ty France. Like, okay, yeah, the first baseman because they catch those throws.
Yeah, that's not really what we want to add.
Assist. So is that assist?
Yeah, assist.
Okay, so now then you get the shortstop. Then you get the shortstops. If you did assist, Wander
some
Franco,
from the outfield,
Lindor, Ozzy Albies, Ezekiel Tovar, Andres Jimenez. So assists could be your number, and you have, a league leader will have like 400, and what's a bad shortstop? Ahmed Rosario has 209. So you'd have a spread there. Again, that'd still be kind of weird. It'd still be kind of weird because you would have a category that has a much different spread than most places. Like, what other stat do people have 300 of right now?
Yeah, it's not good. It's not a stat that I would want to use for that purpose. But I like the spirit of the question. I just don't think you need to add a counting stat in this case because you have it. It's factored in. It's playing time. That's where your defensive value gets baked into fantasy. Thanks a lot for that question, Ted. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic for just $2 a month for the first year at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Find Eno on Twitter at EnoSaris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.